Hey everyone. In this video, let's talk about file system in Node.js. So I'll talk about what exactly the file system is. So if we talk about file system, so file system is basically something, a module in Node.js which help us do all sort of manipulation with the files in Node.js. Whether you want to read the file, write the file, append something to the file, delete the file, create the directories, etc. So all of those things can easily be done with the help of this file system module, and therefore it becomes essential to exactly understand this and how it works, right? And if we talk about like little bit about the applications, so if we talk about the application onto the server side, then uh, you might have realized that things like file uploads, right? So you might be doing file uploads with the help of libraries, that is Multa. So Multa also internally uses file system for a lot of its operation, right? Now there are also things like logging, right? If you are doing logging and you are using libraries like Multa, which is a very famous library to do logging. Now in using Multa, what you can also do is you can segregate the logs in different files, right? So those files can again be created with the help of file system, or let's say you want to rotate the file. So for example, for each day you want a new file which will contain all of your application logs, right? So that file management, that file creation for the each day, that again can be handled with the help of something called file system in Node.js, right? Now comes another application which is like generating reports. So for example, if you are creating if you want to create a PDF file, or let's say you want to download something like CSV, you want to generate reports, right, in different file formats, that can again be easily done with the help of things like file system. Then there are other applications as well. So for example, like building command line tools. Now you might have heard about something called CRA, which is nothing but create React app, right? A tool which was used to scaffold the React application, right? So create React app basically what it does is it scaffold the application. That means it creates the file and folders for you, right? And those file and folders can be created with the help of things like file system. So now let me also show you more onto this. So for example, let's say I have this package called create codefast app, and this is one of the package that we are using at codefast. So if you do not know what exactly the codefast is, so codefast is basically a platform which allow you to ship products faster, right? So what we provide is we provide boilerplates, and this CLI script help us scaffold that whole project very quickly. Now, let me just show you the source code of it, and let's see what goes inside it. So if you look at here carefully, so you can see we are using a file system module for a lot of operations. So for example, creating file, creating directory, right? Or let's say performing a cleanup at the end, right? So all of those things can easily be performed, or like the file system modules is really handy in doing such operations in these kind of scripts, right? So we'll talk about how exactly it works, and at the end we will also look at a example which will clear all of your concepts around file system, right? So let's go in here and let's try to understand. So if you see, these are built-in modules. You do not need to install anything from outside in order to work with the file system. So it exists built into the Node.js. So if you have Node.js installed onto your system, then what you can just do is you can simply use the file system. So let's dive in and let us start writing some code. Okay, now there is one thing that we need to understand about the file system. So it's a huge module, contain lots and lots of APIs, as you can see right over here. Now these APIs, they exist in, like, you can say in three flavors, right? So one is like promise based, second is callback based, and third is synchronous. right? So when we say promises, so you can use ES6 promises, syntax like async await, etc. So in order to perform the operation in an asynchronous way. Again, if you want to perform operation in an asynchronous way, but if you and you do not want to use promises for this one, then what you can do is you can use callbacks, right? So you can use a callback format. Otherwise, there is one more way, which is a synchronous way of working with the files. So this is kind of should be used with the caution, because this can block the thread for that particular time when you're reading or writing into the file, right? So it should be used with the caution, but the default way or the recommended way to deal with the file system is the promises way, right? So you can see there are methods, that is fs promises, that is these methods can be used on a promises version of it, right? And then similarly there are synchronous methods which are there. You can see there are synchronous APIs, and they usually have a suffix that is sync, right, which denotes that these APIs, they work in a synchronous way. So this is one thing to understand. Now let's go in and try and understand how file system works. So what I have is I simply have a folder in here. Now what I can just do is I can just go in and start writing. So for example, let's say I'll simply you create a file right in here. And what I can do is I can just bring in the file system module, right? So this simple line will bring in the file system module. Now let's see how you can do the simple read and write operations, right? So for example, let's say there is some file which exists. So for example, file.txt, and I'll simply write something like welcome to file system, right? Something like this. Now, if I want to read this file, for example, how can I do that? So what you can just do is you can use a method called read file, right? Now, if you want to use, let's say, a promise version of it, let me just show you both of the examples, the callback way or the promises way. So what I can do is now, if you look at the read file method in here, so let me just search for it, to read file. So, okay, not this one. So this is what we were looking for, read file. Now, if you look at the specification for this method, that is read file, it accepts these things as the argument. So for example, the first one is the path, then there are optional options, and these are the values and these are the options that you can pass, and finally the callback method. So let's first give in the path. So this file, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a path module to get the absolute path for this file. So path module is something which help us again deal with the different paths that we have. So for example, let me just go in here and let's say file path and path dot join. I would use directory name and I will simply say file dot txt. So directory name will basically give me the path till the file system folder in which I am in right now. And what I'm doing is I'm joining the file.txt, right? So let me just show you what we'll get in here. So that is the file path, right? And if we just execute this, right? So, okay, we are getting some issue. All right. I think this should be fine. Now, so you can see we are getting a path till the file, right? So now what I can do is I can just plug in my plug in this path into the read file method. So what I'll do is I'll simply say file path, and then there are a few options that you can pass. We'll talk about those options in a minute. And then we have a callback, right? So what I'll do is, and this callback, what it gets is it gets two parameters, the error and the data. So error and the data. And for example, let's say if there is any error, so what I'll do is I'll simply say throw error. Otherwise, what we can do is we can just say console log of data. As simple as that. And if I just execute this, so you can see we are actually getting a data, but it is in kind of a buffer format. So what I can specify right in here is the format, right? So that can be done with the help of something called encoding, right? So what I'll do is I'll simply say encoding is UTF-8. I want data in the UTF-8 format. So you can see we are able to read the file and the text inside it. So this is how simply the read file method works. But if you want to use a promises flavor of it, this was the callback example. Now, what we can do is we can simply say fs/promises, and I'll rename this as FSP, and we can get rid of this one. Now, what I can do is I'll use the async and await syntax. So let me simply say read. I'll use a async function, and let me create async function and let me call it main. Now, what I can do is I can simply say await fsp dot read file, right? And we can simply give it a path, the file path which is there, and the encoding again, right? So that would be UTF-8. Now, this is read file method since it returns the promise. So we are awaiting that promise. And once we have a result, we can store that result in a variable that is data. And let me just print in the data in here. And let's call the main function. So, which is absolutely fine. Now, you can see we are still able to read the file. So this is much more cleaner. And the one thing that you should keep in mind is that we should also do the exception handling in here. So for example, if anything goes wrong, then we should be able to catch that error and maybe print that error. For now, ideally you should throw it, but for now let's just print it, right? So this is just a promises way of reading the file, right? Similarly, if you want to write something into the file, then that can also be done very easily. So for example, what I'll simply do is, let's say I'll just comment this out. What I'll do is, so to write something to the file, what you can do is you can use a method called write file. So let's see what is that method. So here is that method. Now let's look at the promises version of it. And so fs promises.write file. And again, you can see it accepts a file where you want to write the data. And then it accepts that actual data and it can take all of these formats which are there, and again those optional options that you can pass. So what I'll do is I'll simply say await fsp dot write file, and I can write into the file. Let's say I'll create another file. Okay, so I'll call it file path 1, file path 2, like this. So let's say file 2.txt. Right. Let's say I want to write something into this file. So I can simply say file path 2 now, and we can provide the data. Now this data would be anything. So for example, for now, what I'll do is I'll just have some data, that some gibberish, right? And I'm using backticks to write that multi-line string, and we can provide the data, and I can also pass the encoding option to be UTF-8. So this will simply write the uh, the data into our file, and we can just print that uh, file written successfully. So this is how you can simply write anything inside a file. So you can see file written successfully. If we go in here, I think we have messed up with the name. So what I'll do is I'll just say file2, and let's execute this again. So we should get the data inside the file too. And you can see we are getting all these spaces and everything in the same way we have written this thing, right? So uh, this is because of the backticks. But if you write something like writing through file system, right? Something like that. So it will overwrite the data and will write this data now inside the file too. So you can see we are getting that data written into the file. So these are the like basic operations that you can perform using file system, like read and write. Now let's do one question using which you'll be able to understand all of the concept around file system. So for example, let's say I want to do things like, let's say there is so for example, let's say there are two files that we have, right? So there is another file. Now, both of these files contain numbers, right? So let me use the pen. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, -2, 3, 7, 99, etc. Right? So they contain numbers. Now, what I want to read these two files. Right? You have to perform a read operation. And then what we have to do is we have to sort the numbers and then finally merge these numbers into a final file, right? Something like this, right? So you have to read, sort, merge, and write that final result into a third file. So this would be a kind of, you know, uh, so this will contain all the numbers from both the files. Okay, so this is what we have to do, right? So how can we do this? Now, let me show you how easily you can do this with the help of file system. So what I'll do is I'll create a folder and maybe uh, merge sort file. I'll call it merge sort file. And inside of this, I'll create app.js, and we will simply require that FSP module. Again, we will need it, right? And what I'll do is I'll simply say fs/process. Okay, as simple as that. Now we have, let's say, a files folder in which our input files will live, right? So let's say input1.txt, and this would contain numbers, right? So let me have numbers in here like this. Okay. Now we can also have one more file, which is input2.txt, right? So input.2.txt will again have few numbers. Fine. Now, there are seven numbers in each of the files. So final file will definitely have like 14 numbers at the end, right? So what I can now do is, first of all, let's let's set up the path, input file path, input one file path, and that would be nothing but path dot join, and I'll use directory name and the files folder and input one.txt, right? And then we have input2.txt, and I'll call this input to file path, and let's log these file and quickly check that we are getting the correct path, right? So what I'll do is I'll just go to the merge sort folder and let me just execute this. So you can see we are getting the correct file path. Now we are ready to read the files. So what I'll do is I'll create a function actually that can help us read the file. So function read file, and I want to read file from the path, right? So that would be nothing but fsc dot read file from the path, and encoding should be UTF-8, right? So it's a kind of reusable method that we have created so that we can just give the different path and read the content from the file. And remember, this function read file will return a promise, so you can just do async await, like you can just do await onto the return promise, right? So which is fine. Now let me write a main function which will act as an orchestrator for this whole code. Now what I can just do is I can just put in a try and catch in here. So console log of error, let's say we'll print that error. Now what I'll do is I'll simply say await read file, and it accepts a path. So what I'll do is I'll simply say input one file path, and let's say input to file path. So const data one, and let's say data two, and let's print the data one and data two, right? Let's print the data two, and let's call the main function finally so that this code is executed. Now, if we just execute this code, you can see we are able to print all the numbers which are there, right? So let me create a separator, and so you can see these are all the numbers which are there in the first file, and these are all the numbers which are there in the second file. Now, if we also check the type of this, right? So the type of data one is a string, right? So whatever we read with the help of the read file method, we get the string in here, right? So, and the string is actually separated by a new line character. So what I can now do is I can create two arrays because we have to perform the merge operations in here, right? So first we have done the read, and then maybe we can first perform the merge, and then maybe we can do the sorting at the end, right? So let's create two arrays. So arr1 would be nothing but data1 dot split will split the string around the backslash and the new line character, and the same we will do for the data2, right? So we'll now get two arrays, which is arr1 and arr2, right? So we are getting two arrays, and we are getting each element as a string, each number as a string. They are not numbers, they are the string, right? So we will basically so while sorting, we have to keep in mind that if we directly apply the sort, then since these are string, they will be lexicographically sorted, right? But if you want to sort in like ascending order and descending order, like 0, 1, 2, 3, like in a natural number or order, then maybe we'll have to use sort in a proper way so that we don't end up sorting lexicographically. So I think that is fine. Now let's finally merge these arrays. So what I'll do is I'll create a final array that is ARR, and I'll concatenate array1 dot concat ARR2, right? And finally we'll have the merged array right in here. So this is actually a read operation that we have performed, and this is actually a merge operation that we have performed, right? So let's go and print it. So you can see all the elements have been merged into a single array that is ARR. Now, what I can do is I can again combine, I can like do the sort now. Okay, let's do the sort. So sort can again be performed like this. So I can say sort and we will use a comparator and I'll simply say a minus b. So this can be, so why I'm doing this? So that these numbers, they are actually sorted in the ascending order. You can read more about it, how sort comparator function works. But yes, this will basically make sure that the numbers are sorted in the ascending order. Now we just printed, you can see we are now getting 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 6, 32, 34, etc. Now we are getting the numbers actually in the ascending order. And finally, what I can do is I can perform the join operation to get back the string, right? To get back the string to be written into a file, right? So now what I'll do is I'll simply say const str and arr dot join. I'll join the string again with separated with \n so that we get the numbers like in different lines. And finally, what I'll do is I'll write this string back to the uh, you know to the file. So let's say I want to write the result into the output.txt, and let me just create a path for it as well. So I'll simply say output file path. And what I'll do is I'll simply say output.txt, output.txt. And now what I can just do is I can say fsp.write file. I'll write the file to the output file path and I'll write the data. And if you want, you can give the encoding, that is UTF-8 in here. So this will make sure the file is written. And since the write file method will return a promise, so let's await this and let's do console log of file written successfully, right? Like this. So if I go and execute this, we can see we are getting file written successfully. And if we go to output.txt, you can see all the numbers are actually stored in a sorted order. And there are total 14 numbers that we have got, which basically means that it's working absolutely fine. So this was all about file system. There are different other things or other utilities or methods which are available. So for example, if you want to work with the directory, so there are things like remove directory. If you want to delete the files, so there are things like unlink, right? So you can perform kind of all of the CRUD operations onto the file using this file system module. And yeah, this was all about file system module. Maybe you can comment out and let me know what else you would like to understand in Node.js, and maybe I'll create another video explaining the intricacies of those modules or anything you would like to discuss. So this was all about it. I'll see you in the next video.